Right, we are removing the caliper from the front right brake, and we need to compress the pistons on the caliper so that we can pull it off of the rotor, because the pistons are tight right now. We also are removing the two bolts that hold the caliper to the frame, and these are on sliding uh, metal shafts that allow the caliper to slide within the frame depending on the amount of wear on the brake pads. So it helps the caliper to center itself on the rotor, and that way the you get even braking and don't wear one side of the brakes more than the other side. So right now I'm trying to get the caliper off of the rotor, pulling it out from the frame, but it's still a little bit tight. So I'm going to grab a crescent wrench here, or a channel lock, and I'm going to stick that end into the cooling fins of the rotor, and then I can force against the rotor and the frame of the caliper to compress the pistons a little farther so that I can slide the caliper off the disc brake rotor. So I'm still trying to get a little more of a compression in there. And when you do these brakes, when you put new pads in there, you want to have those pistons pressed all the way back into the caliper. And you see I've got that flat piece of aluminum and two clamps, and I've got them clamped all the way back into the caliper housing, the piston housing. So right now, I've undone the 17 millimeter bolts that held the caliper to the frame, and then the frame is on a couple of sliding pieces of metal that are in there. And okay, let's concentrate on this right now. What we're going to do is take a random orbit sander, and we're going to sand the inside and outside of the rotor with 100 grit sandpaper. And I'm going to put some new paper on here right now and then do the inside. But that will score up the steel on the rotor so that the new brake pads will seat nicely. And so I'm going to pull the rotor sander away, and then you can see the scoring that takes place. So it has a nice circular scoring, smooths everything out. It's not perfect, but we're not worried so much about getting the rotor machined, taking it to a shop, removing it. I don't need to do all that effort. Just a good sanding on it will work plenty well. So what I'm doing right now is I've got those slide pins, and I'm sanding those off and cleaning them off. I'm going to wipe them off with some brake cleaner, and I assemble these dry. Some people grease them, and some people use them dry. And the reason I use them dry is that all the ones that I've seen that get greased collect brake dust and plug up, and they don't slide evenly. And these ones here, I did these brakes back in 2019, and the pins just slid right out. They were free moving, and there was no need for lubricant in them. They worked just fine. And in 2019, when I did them, it was quite a chore to pull them out. I actually had to get a big wrench on them and twist them out, and I think I applied a little bit of heat to it also. So when I got them out, I had to clean off a bunch of hardened up grease that was filled with brake dust. Okay, so we are putting the new disc brake pads in now, and on that inside pad, that is the one next to the pistons on the caliper, and you want to put the stainless steel heatsink. It's just a piece of stainless steel with a bunch of holes drilled into it, and it's the same shape as the metal backing of the disc brake pad, and it has a couple of clips that it clips right onto the pad and stays in place. And so you want to have that heat sink in there to help separate the heat from the rotor and pads from penetrating, traveling into the pistons and brake fluid. Okay, so I'm just tapping the outer brake disc pad into position, and then we are going to put in, there's two retaining clips. There's the top one, and here's the bottom one. So you want to make sure that those are in place. Those spring inward, so they kind of help to hold the brake pads in tight to the rotor. It's not real tight, just it holds them in though. So now I'm taking the clamps off so that I can get the rotor back onto the, or the caliper back onto the rotor. Pardon my skipping around with the descriptions here. And make sure that when you put the caliper back on, that your hose is positioned correctly. You don't want to put in additional twists or anything. You want to make sure that you put it back on the same way it came off. So we are positioning the rotor caliper over those slide bolts. And again, those take, I think it was the 17 millimeter bolt goes into them. And we are assembling them dry. You see there is a rubber boot on there, and you have to make sure that that boot fits over the ridge on both sides of that bolt to seal the inside. You see I'm doing that right now. And then also the slide has a square end you see on the inside next to the rubber boot that has to position just right in there. And it's kind of a square end, and it fits into a squared off area in the casting. And so I've got the rubber boots back on, and now I'm tightening the bolts back down. I've got my torque wrench there, and I don't remember what the torque rating is. It might be like 50 pounds, but you can Google it quick and easy. But it's always good to torque your parts down to the factory specification. And so actually that is my large half-inch, my long half-inch ratchet. And I'll get the torque wrench here in just a minute.
Yeah, no. Would you like it open?
And I was just making sure that that pin was, the square end of the pin was positioned correctly into the casting. Otherwise it won't sit right. It'll sit at a slight angle, and that's not good. Okay, so now I'm just tightening down the upper bolt, and then I will get the torque wrench here in a second. But the brakes go together pretty quick and easy. Once you have all of your parts and everything in hand, it comes apart and goes back together pretty quick. Okay, so there is the torque wrench, and I do not remember what the torque torque rating on it was, but as I say, it's easy enough to just look it up on your smartphone and it'll tell you, or call your favorite auto parts store and they'll tell you. Okay, so the right side is done, and now we are moved over to the left side, and basically assembling and disassembling the caliper on the left is the same as the right. And what we're doing right now is giving a good sand to the rotor on the left side, and now I'm going to get under there and do the inside here in a minute.
Going in quite right.
And now we're going to put the brake disc pads into the frame,
completely flat,
making sure that all the stainless steel parts that were there are back. And you see we have our retainer clips are on the two disc brake pads now. So you see the upper one and the lower one. We've got the heat shield is on the inboard, the inside pad against the pistons in the caliper. And now we're going to put the caliper on. And the caliper is just going to fit right in there nicely. And then we'll put the bolts back in. They run into the slide bolts that we just sanded off and cleaned them up and sprayed out the holes that they go into with brake cleaner, cleaned them out, ran a couple of paper towels, twisted them in and out a few times, made sure all the dirt was pulled out of there so they're assembled dry. They slide nice and freely. I don't put lubricant in the pads in those rods, slide bolts, because the lubricant tends to collect brake dust and then it gums up, stickies up, and doesn't work right. All right, so just finished torquing, or we are torquing down the bolts now. Again, you can check the torque online or call your favorite auto parts store, get the proper torque, and it's always nice to put things together with the correct torque. So we are closing in on it now. We've just got to finish this one and the upper caliper bolt. And so we've got the caliper bolts are now torqued in properly, and we are putting the wheels back on. So this job is finished. The brakes are pretty simple to do. There's just, you take off the wheel, you take off the two bolts that hold the caliper to the frame, and you remove the pins from the caliper. Then you compress the pistons on the caliper against the rotors, and you can remove them. There you see we're torquing the wheels down properly. And then you clean out the holes for the slide bolts. And then in reverse order, you put the disc brake pads back on the caliper frame, and then you put the caliper over them. Make sure you've got all the original hardware, retaining clips and springs, and the heatsink back where they were. And then you're ready to put your wheels back on. The one thing you do is you do not need to put brake fluid into your master cylinder reservoir, and especially not before you put in new brake pads, because as you compress the pistons back in on all the calipers, that is going to raise the level right back up to the original level when the brakes were new. So then there's also no need to bleed the brakes because you never cracked open the brake lines. So it's an easy project to do. The rear brakes are a little bit more involved because there is a trick to uh, getting the rear rotors off if you have to change them. And a lot of trucks, nobody ever changes the rear brake pads because they're kind of uh, they run into problems with them. And so you'll see that on another video here that I'll be releasing with this one. And so I will direct each video to the other so that you can do front and rear brakes. And then I'll also link the old original long form brake video that was 52 minutes long, but very thorough. All right, so I hope this video helps you. If you liked it, please do click a like and leave a comment, ask a question. And if it's something that you want to see more of, subscribe. We do a lot of travel videos and we do a lot of how-to video. All right, thanks for watching, and I will see you on the next video.